This is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And welcome to Midday with Reverend Don. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Reverend Don, we can communicate directly. If you type your comments or questions into whatever platform you happen to be watching on, and they will show up here in my chat room and we'll talk directly. And hello to Janet in the chat room. It's good to see you, Janet. Um, Today is Friday, and today we're going to conclude our conversation on tarot. And I also want to ask if people have more subjects they would like to hear about. I certainly can think of subjects, but I like to have your input into choosing the things that we're going to talk about on the program. It is it's good to have that back and forth. I want to take a moment, as I've been doing, to mention the Corellian Book of the Dead. First shipment went to the post office yesterday. Another one will go in the next day or so. It will take a couple of shipments to get them all out. We have sold more than our original shipment coming in is going to cover, but we've made a second order that should be here in a few days. So if you've ordered one, you will have it soon. And hello to Tom in the chat room. It's good to see you, Tom. And we're looking now at our next selection of books. There are a number of possibilities. We'll see what comes. I'm thinking of possibly doing an in-depth book on astrology. Hello to Mary in the chat room. And I'm curious to know if that's something that people would find interesting. If you've studied my lessons, you'll know that I've written about astrology. And if you are unusually familiar with my career, you'll know that at an earlier point, I did a lot more with astrology. At one time, I wrote a daily advice column on the subject of astrology. I once did well, more than once, I did the Llewellyn Astrological Planner. So I have quite a background in astrology, but in writing the lessons, I was writing an introduction to the subject. I was thinking I might write a more complete look at how to interpret astrological aspects. And Mary says that she'd love a good book on astrology. So, maybe that will be the next thing for me. And of course, we also are bringing out works by authors other than myself. We recently brought out Travel Magic by Lisa McSherry. And Travel Magic is a fascinating little book. And perhaps here in the near future, we'll talk about it more. I don't have it handy to hold up for you, but it's a good book. Travel Magic talks about all kinds of different ways that you can use magic to have better travel experiences, but it also, while focusing on the subject of travel magic as such, is a good beginner's book on magic at the same time. And hello to Calvin in the chat room, who comes to us from Raleigh, North Carolina. It's good to see you, Calvin. There are many different things that we're looking at bringing out in the near future. And as we go into next year, we're hoping to have a quite robust itinerary. But, it only moves as fast as we can move. We're looking at bringing out some holiday cards also. As you may know, a couple of years ago, I did the Santa expansion deck for the Infinite Tarot, which involved a lot of Yuletide-oriented artwork. And we're looking at perhaps making some of those into Yule cards. And we're looking in a variety of directions at Corellian Publishing. So these are some of the things on my mind today. We wanted to continue. Oh, and hello to Julia in the chat room. And Julia says she'd like to know more about moon magic. Okay, thank you, Julia. We will see what we could do with moon magic. Um, and that does incline to set me off on a slight tangent. Lately online, I've been seeing um, a meme about how the year should be 13 months long and every month a certain number of days and blah blah blah. And lots of people naively agreeing with this, not realizing that's already been done. And there's no reason it couldn't be done again, provided certain questions were answered. And here's the thing, and it's something that you probably wouldn't think about because I didn't until I knew, but the year is not. Um, it's not a simple calculation. It's not just a certain number of days. It's not even that way. And so there's heavy mathematics involved in trying to figure out a year calendar that works. What happened in the ancient world where things like the 13-month lunar calendar was a thing and it's still used liturgically in many religions. But what happened is that the lunar calendar, it falls out of sync with the solar calendar, and they both fall out of sync with the actual year without those heavy mathematical calculations. The Egyptians at one point had their calendar months out of alignment with the natural year. The Romans had the same problem. Um, the Gregorian calendar was created to replace the Julian calendar, which was days out of sync with the actual year and would have fallen still farther. So the thing about the idea of a year calendar, no matter what you're basing it on, you can't assume that a certain number of days is all you have to think about, because in the end, it's not even like that. One of the things I found that I thought was really interesting, every time we have a major earthquake, it affects the rotation of the Earth, and it shortens our day, if I remember correctly, by a certain fraction of seconds. Not enough that we would notice, but enough that over the course of hundreds and thousands of years, it adds up. So the length of our year today is not quite the same as 1,000 years ago, let alone 5,000 years ago. And who knows how much of a difference it's made over the fullness of time. But this is one of those little considerations you don't think about. We don't think about things like our year not being as stable as it seems. Another thing I saw recently, and I'm way off of our topic, but on the subject of the shape of the Earth itself. We portray the Earth as if it were round or even spherical, but it's neither of those things. It's a lump, basically, with protrusions and intrusions, and it's not remotely even in its surface. And the result of that is that gravity is different in different parts of the Earth, depending on their relative elevation. We don't normally think of that unless possibly we're going hiking in the Andes. Um, but it makes a small difference, not enough that you would mostly notice it. But when you stop and think, it reminds you the world is not as simple as we try to make it out. Now, when we come back to the study of metaphysics, even the study of tarot, which is our technical subject today, we want to remember this, that when we as humans talk about things, we tend to simplify them, and we forget that it's all much more individual than we like to make it. We like to organize everything so that we have an absolute guide to where we think we are, but none of it is that absolute. Another thing that one could easily be excused for not knowing. If you look at charts of the human body, the places where they put the organs, even more the places where they put blood vessels, these are general. In an actual human body, they're far more specific and not necessarily quite where they're shown, which can be quite a challenge to doctors on occasion. but important for us to know. And why is it important for us to know in metaphysics? There are people out there who will tell you, you must do exactly X with no variation ever, or everything will be terrible, which if you follow my work, you know I do not agree with. But this is one of the reasons, because things are always individual. Maybe it's because I'm a Gemini that I'm very aware of that. And if I were, for example, a Capricorn, I might be less inclined to think that way. I don't know. However, that kind of sun sign astrology is a little oversimplified itself. Um, but when we approach anything in life, and certainly including magic, we have to remember that every circumstance presents its own situation, and we have to be prepared to vary what we're doing. Um, the idea that it somehow is so universal it never varies is simply not true. This is true in reading also. And, we were talking about the meaning of cards in an earlier broadcast. And let's just draw a card because we can. And we've drawn the Ten of Swords. And if you look at the picture on the Ten of Swords, if you're going by just the picture, you would not take this as a positive card. The way I read this is the situation that you're in is uh, the situation that you're in is ending and a new one is beginning. I don't see it as a negative card at all. But how you would read it coming up in a reading can vary drastically from any of those things. It can be heavily influenced by other cards that are showing up, by what you might know about the situation, by any number of influences, and you have to remain open to that. Um, the truth is that when you're skilled in tarot reading, the idea that there's only one possible definition for a card is simply no longer true. And I find that sometimes a card that I would normally read a certain way will just strike me different in a particular reading because it's meaning to tell me something different there. And this is true of everything in life. We have to remain flexible. And I want to say hello to Lavola in the chat room. It's good to see you, Lavola. Hello to Sir Edward, who says, I am always seen as Aquarius. And yes, that's absolutely true. Hello to Elio in the chat room. It's good to see you, Elio. And Elio agrees with Julia in wanting to see more about moon magic. And yeah, that might be something we could talk about. Um, I am not myself especially lunar oriented. Not especially not either, but the moon is very important in the history of metaphysics and in how many people approach it. And symbolically, it's very important. And those things we could talk to at considerable length. One of the things that surprised me, I have a friend who specializes in Balkan witchcraft. This friend practices Dianic witchcraft, but not the feminist Dianic witchcraft that we see in the United States, but witchcraft centered around the goddess Diana, as you would find it in the Balkans, where it's a very different matter entirely. And what surprised me is how similar it is to historical descriptions of Western European witchcraft. And certainly very concerned with the moon. Of course, Diana is the goddess of the moon, um, which has a lot to do with her connection to witchcraft. Now, coming back to tarot cards. Yesterday, we were talking about how important it is to keep your energy clear when you're reading for many people. Um, and that if you're going to be a professional reader, your psychic hygiene is something you must pay attention to. Because if you're going to be a professional reader, or even just an enthusiastic amateur, you may find yourself reading for lots of different people. And when you read for them, you pick up their energy. Now, this is also true anytime you deal with people at all. That's why some people really don't like to be in crowds. They haven't shielded themselves enough to keep those other people, their energy out of their own system, or they don't know how to remove it once it's there. But anytime we interact with people, we naturally share energy. But when we do a reading, we're very intentionally opening ourselves, both as the reader and the client, each to the other. So naturally, you're getting far more energy from that person than just from a social interaction with them. And if you're doing 20 of them in a day, you're going to be picking up energy from a lot of people. And you really don't want to carry that forward. There's nothing wrong with picking it up, but you want to put it back down. Very, very important consideration. And we talked about how to do that. You just wash it out. There are many ways to cleanse energy. Um, this is the way that I do it. You can read most of my books to get different ways to do that, but I just imagined it as light or water pouring through me, carrying out all the excess energy that I don't need, whether it's mine or someone else's, whatever its source. But when you're doing readings, this is very important because all of that other energy can be overwhelming to your system. It's very important to keep your system clear. And oh, and hello to Reverend Ravenwolf. It's good to see you. And to pay attention to your psychic hygiene. Now, Reverend Calvin says, "What about celestial magic? That could be a very interesting thing, also." And it is another thing we could talk about. We could talk about a lot of different subjects on the subject of magic. We could talk about Goetia at some point. I often talk about the fact my mother was Corellian. Oh, and hello to Renee in the chat room. It's good to see you, Renee. And my mother was Corellian, but my father was ceremonial. And for the most part, he would have come under the heading of Goetic in what he was doing. And oh, and Calvin refers specifically to the use of star pentacles. And I had to throw in uh, my little message about pentacles yesterday, but this is a good time to mention it again. In um, any sort of celestial magic, pentacles are quite important. And a pentacle is not a five-pointed star in a circle. It is a physical depiction of um, a metaphysical symbol with a specific meaning that is being used. Um, and it is important to bear in mind that there are many different pentacles, some of which are also pentagrams. Um, and hello to Poketli in the chat room. It's good to see you, Poketli. And if I've been help with anything, I'm very glad. And Poketli says, "Thank you, Grandpa." Um, and yeah, I mean that's the whole point of this work, to try to be of help to people, and because it certainly wasn't about making money, and I'm perfectly fine with that. That was a conscious choice, but yeah, I've always been a great believer in the idea that the more that we can help people, the better world we're going to make. The more good information we help people have, that is to say, the less oogie boogie information we can help people have, the better a world we're going to make. The more we can help people to access the higher powers of their own soul, which is what psychism and magic are, the better the world is going to be. And therefore, it's going to be better for us as well as for them and for everyone. And to me, that is the point of why we do this work. So, yes, we can talk about different forms of magic. We can talk about moon magic. We could have a whole show on pentacles if we wanted. I can collect a few for you and show you what they historically are and how they're historically used. And is it wrong to use it in a more limited sense to refer to the design of a five-pointed star in a circle? Not as long as you understand it's an idiosyncratic definition, not to be confused with a whole definition. For most people, that is not what the word means, and that's important to know. Um, and the reason for the confusion is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck more than any other source, because they use the term pentacle correctly to refer to the suit of coins, but people misunderstood exactly how they were using it. Now, Alio has a question. What do you think is the best enabler to help with getting telepathic messages sent? Practice. Practice is certainly the best thing. Depends in part on are you trying to receive them or trying to send them? Um, for me, if you're trying to send them, what you want to do is to call forth the soul and speak to it directly. And in all cases, you want to be far enough into at least a light trance um, to send it. But it's practice really that's the most important thing. If you're looking for an exterior something, I would think quartz crystal would be helpful. It always raises vibration. Um, Stones that have to do with communication or with psychic abilities, such as amethyst or lapis lazuli, might be a good choice. These are possibilities too. But the most important thing is practice. Most important thing in all of this is going to be practice. And Lavola says, what do you mean by the RW deck confuses people about the pentacle? Well, let's see if we can pull up a pentacle. Oh, here we go. Queen of Pentacles. So this is the Queen of Pentacles. And as you can see, the green parts of the card are dissolving because of the green screen. But you can see that in the picture, the Queen is holding a physical object with a pentagram on it. And that is a pentacle. But what makes it a pentacle is being a physical object, not the design. But because all the pentacles in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck are also pentagrams, a lot of people mistook the meaning of the word for the design rather than the object. And there are people out there who think a pentagram is a five-pointed star and a pentacle is a five-pointed star in a circle. And historically speaking, those are not the definitions of those terms. And if you try to go outside of very narrow circumstances, people aren't going to understand it that way. That is just not how they're historically used. The term pentagram comes from the Greek language. The term pentacle comes from either Italian or French, and they have very different meanings. The term pentagram specifically does refer to a five-pointed star with or without a circle, and whether it's unicursal or not. And the term pentacle originally referred to a medallion, specifically, and later to any 3D representation of a metaphysical symbol used in metaphysical practice. The fact that they sound very similar has led to a lot of confusion. I've even seen the ridiculous suggestion that pentacle was merely an attempt to Latinize the word pentagram, as if pentagram wasn't well documented in Latin in its own sense. Um, what it was an attempt to Latinize the Italian word pentaculo, which also has the French version pentacole, both of which mean a medallion hanging from a chain. And that's how they were used in the early grimoires. You would have a sigil, which might be on the altar, and a pentagram or a pentacle, using both words in rapid succession, but a pentacle that you would wear in the ceremony. They were not the same symbol. They had different purposes. Later, it became the practice to take the pentacle and make it into a physical object that you might put on your altar as well. And I would say that the term is probably expanded even beyond that, um, to any 3D representation. But what it has not done, in wide use at least, is contracted. And but on the other hand, we also want to remember that language is expansive. Um, and very often, words are going to be used differently by different people. And semantic arguments are always foolish. And it's one thing to say, yes, you want to remember all of these things are true. It's another thing to get upset because of how someone's using a word. And I think that that is, in the end, just a distraction that occupies our thinking mind and really ought not to. So, to some extent, my attitude is really use the words how you want. Um, but do remember, if you're using it in an idiosyncratic fashion, as I do many words, do remember it's not the only understanding of that word. It's like lustration. In the Correllian tradition, the lustration is a very important ceremony, and we use that term in the sense in which it comes down from Latin, which is a liturgical sense used for a particular sort of blessing, using water that has been blessed with light. In this case, the light is energy. In some cases, lustral water is literal light, the light of the sun, the light of the moon, light of stars, but it can also be energetic light. However, I'm certainly not unaware that there are people who have adapted that word in other less positive directions. Um, but that does not mean that we stop using it simply because others have changed its meaning. And with that, I see that we're coming to the end of our half hour. This really concludes everything that I was going to say about tarot reading. If you have any further questions about it, however, feel free to ask them, to put them in future chats or on my page, and we can certainly talk about it. And I want to thank you for joining me. I love spending this time with you. I love all of you, and and I love talking with you. And, I can remember a time when if you had told me I would sit in front of a camera talking nonstop for half an hour, um, I would have considered that an impossibility. But now it seems like it goes very quickly for the most part. And this brings us back to that subject of practice. The more you practice a thing, the better you're going to get at it. That's true whether it's magic, whether it's artwork, whether it's broadcasting, no matter what it is, practice always improves it. And so that will be my final message for today. And let us close with our prayer as we always do. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do in our lives, and we ask you to help us to judge those things that are truly important in life and let go of the things that are truly not important. Help us to keep our focus on the things that give us a better life, that make a better world. And those distractions that might incline us to waste our energy on foolish concerns, let us ignore those and focus instead on the things that are productive and beneficial for everyone. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love, knowing you are always with us. But from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. And I will see you on Monday. And uh, have a wonderful weekend.